You make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up 500,000 in soybeans and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show.
Show me the money!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on.
I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness.
Your money, your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Hi, everybody. It is Peter Schiff, and I am back in my home here in Connecticut, my summer home. Got about another month or so out here before I go back to Puerto Rico. I did a lot of traveling, as you know, over the last month. In fact, the last podcast that I did, I recorded it from a cruise ship, and I've now been back for about a week. I was able to celebrate the 4th of July here in Connecticut, had a very wonderful fireworks display. And, you know, normally, or not normally, but on many occasions, you know, since I've been doing my podcasts, I've spent some time talking about the 4th of July holiday and really, you know, why America is so unique among nations. There's a lot of talk about American exceptionalism, but very few people today understand just what made America so exceptional, because those characteristics really don't apply today. We have lost a lot of what made us not just great, but so unique and so different from other people in other countries. You know, not that I've got something against a lot of those other countries and the other people, but I just think that there was something unique about America that really made us special. And we've lost that. And rather than give it away, because I have discussed it on many occasions, I want to encourage people to go to my YouTube channel and watch the Peter Schiff Independence Day remix, which in and of itself is about 4 or 5 years old. But what I did is it's an hour long, and I went back to 2 or 3 other podcasts that I recorded or did live on the 4th of July. And I really went into all of the unique aspects of what it meant to be an American and why the 4th of July holiday was so special for Americans. So rather than, you know, kind of give that away, and since I've, you know, pretty well explained it in prior podcasts, I want to encourage people, when you're finished listening to this, to go to my YouTube channel. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe. I'm still trying to get 600,000 subscribers. I still haven't been able to get through that barrier. But subscribe to my YouTube channel and then watch that remix, the Peter Schiff 4th of July remix. And then when you're done, share it with your friends, because I think a lot of people would benefit from learning those lessons, because unfortunately, a lot of people don't learn those lessons in government schools because most of the teachers have no idea what it meant to be an American and don't understand our founding principles. You know, also, there's another video that you might want to check out. If you notice, if you look over my shoulder over here, you'll see that bronze bull. Well, I was given that award by Latino Wall Street. I was very thrilled to get that award. In fact, they had a conference, their national conference in Florida, and it started the day the cruise ship arrived. And it was a 2-day conference, so I was there in time for the second day. And I came there, and they gave me this award. And, you know, I really appreciate the work that they're doing at Latino Wall Street. And I couldn't believe how flattering the introduction was. I mean, I've been introduced by a lot of people over the years. I don't think I've ever received an introduction quite so flattering. In fact, I didn't even realize how flattering it was while I was there, because I was talking kind of, you know, behind the scenes to somebody while she was introducing me. So I kind of missed it. So it wasn't until I got the video that I really saw, because I might have thanked them even more than I did when I got the award. But they're a good organization. They're great people. And, I spoke, or I didn't speak that much. They did a Q&A, but you can see the whole thing. I put it up on my YouTube channel. Peter Schiff is given the award by Latino Wall Street. So you can see them handing me this bronze bull. I mean, I did joke about that it should have been a bear. But of course, even though I'm known for being a bear, I am bullish on a lot of things, right? I'm bullish on gold and silver, more so now than ever before, probably. But I'm bullish on my foreign stocks that I've been buying, and I'm bullish on resources, and I'm bullish on emerging markets. So I'm not just a bear. I'm not bearish on everything, but I'm kind of known in the Wall Street community, for those who do know me, as the bull, as the bear. I mean, a lot of people call me a perma bear, right? So I thought maybe, a bronze bear might have been more appropriate, but the bull is their motto, right? Latino Wall Street, their mascot is the bull, right? They didn't choose the bear. So they gave me this bronze bull. And so I've got it right in the back here. It's in my house in Connecticut. My plan is to bring it back with me to Puerto Rico, right? That's another thing I got to carry on a plane. But I think it'd be more appropriate to keep it there because, that's where I'm closer to my Latino roots with this Latino Wall Street award. But anyway, I want to get into the podcast today and talk about a lot of stuff that's been going on in the past week or 2 weeks since I recorded that podcast on the ship. I think one of the most significant things that's been happening are the trade deals, right? The supposed trade deals that Donald Trump has been negotiating. Because as you remember, there was a 90-day pause after the reciprocal tariffs resulted in a crash in the stock and bond market of the dollar, a crash that stocks recovered from, bonds mostly recovered, and the dollar didn't recover at all. In fact, the dollar made new lows. But the reason that we got the recovery is because we got the pause. Trump called the tariffs off. And in fact, he earned the nickname of Taco, right? Trump always chickens out, Taco. And I think that the markets are expecting another helping of Taco because Trump has been announcing some very bad deals. And the Nasdaq still finished at a new high today, right? The markets are still rising, despite the fact that we're now learning that the Liberation Day tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, are coming back. I mean, they may not be quite as high as they were originally proposed, but they're almost there. And in some cases, they're higher. But they're much higher than what investors expected when they bought that dip. Now, the first sign of this happened last week, and I actually did a Twitter Spaces or X Spaces and discussed it, on Friday. But I talked about the Vietnam deal because that really shows where Trump is going, and it really exposes a lot of the BS that a lot of people were talking about when Trump first announced these tariffs. Because remember, there are a lot of free traders that normally wouldn't like tariffs. And so they had to justify what Trump was doing. One I recall was, Larry Kudlow. I was listening to him on his show on Fox Business. But he was saying, look, Trump's a free trader. Trump wants free trade. He's just going to leverage these tariffs. He's coming up with a high tariff, hoping that other countries will drop their tariffs to zero. And then we'll reciprocate and do the same thing, right? They tariff us zero, we tariff them zero. Because supposedly these high tariffs were there to reciprocate the high tariffs that other countries had on us. Except they didn't have high tariffs on us. They were all make-believe. But people thought, well, if other countries go to zero, well, maybe we'll go to zero. Well, that's exactly what Vietnam did. Vietnam dropped their tariffs on U.S. imports basically to zero. Now, they weren't very high before. I think they were still less than 10%. I mean, so they were there. I mean, 9-10% isn't nothing, but it's certainly not, a big wall of protectionism that's going to keep our products out of their markets, right? But there were some tariffs. Well, Vietnam said, okay, Trump, we'll go down to zero. Now, what did Donald Trump do? Did Donald Trump say, great, that's exactly what I wanted. Now we're going to go to zero too, and we're going to have free trade? No, that's not what Trump did. Trump raised tariffs on Vietnam to 20%, hardly zero. And that's higher, much higher than the tariffs were on Vietnamese imports before Liberation Day. And if it turns out that goods came through Vietnam via China, so China sends goods to Vietnam and then Vietnam re-exports them to us, that's going to be a 40% tariff. Now, I'm not really sure how we, prove that what we're getting from Vietnam originated in China. So maybe there'll be some cheating to get the lower tariff. But we're going to be paying 20 to 40% tariffs. That's not zero. That's not free trade. So, Vietnam lived up to its end of the bargain, and we did not. Now, of course, Trump is touting this as this big win, because when you hear the way he presented it on Truth Social and the way he talks to the media, he said they're going to be paying 20 to 40% tariffs, and we're not paying any tariffs. But he's got it backwards. They're not paying our 20 to 40% tariffs. We're paying those tariffs. The Vietnamese are paying no tariffs because their government lowered their tariffs to zero. So as a result of this negotiation where we supposedly came out on top, the Vietnamese get to buy American products and their government is not going to tax them for doing that. So our products are now cheaper for the Vietnamese. That sounds like a win for them, right? If I was in Vietnam and the government said, hey, guess what? If you want to buy stuff from America, it's now cheaper. Oh, that's good. Now I have extra money to buy something else, right? Because I didn't have to spend as much on that American product. On the other hand, Americans are now being told everything you buy from Vietnam is going to be maybe 20 to 40% more expensive. Now, sure, the business may not pass along 100% of that tariff. Maybe the business will eat some of it and take a lower profit. Who knows? But Americans are going to be paying these tariffs. So we lost the deal. It's not a good deal for us. It's a rotten deal for us. I mean, maybe in Donald Trump's mind, it's a great deal because he gets to pretend that we won something, because he gets to pretend that Vietnam is paying these tariffs when they're not. We're paying the tariffs. But more important, it proves that the whole idea that we were trying to be sold, that Trump's real goal was a level playing field of zero tariffs, is complete BS. And in fact, more proof of that was just announced earlier today. Donald Trump announced that we're going to have 50% tariffs on Brazilian imports. We don't even have a trade deficit with Brazil. I didn't even realize that, but we have a small surplus with Brazil. But now we want to make Americans pay a 50% tariff to buy Brazilian products. And Trump said that we're going to do this for political reasons. So because Trump has some kind of political beef with Brazil, he's going to make Americans pay 50% more to buy Brazilian products? I mean, why is he taking out his frustration on the Brazilians with the Americans? But again, this is part of his misunderstanding of who pays his tariffs. I mean, we're not able to push off our costs on the rest of the world, right? That's just not the way tariffs work. Now, in addition to the deal he made with Vietnam, later than that, he made a deal with Japan and Korea. Or he didn't make a deal, excuse me. He started sending out letters. Trump went public and said, look, nobody's making a deal with me. We're not getting good deals. I'm just going to send out letters telling people what they're going to pay for the privilege of doing business in the United States, right? I'm just going to assign these tariffs, and that's what every country is going to pay. No, it's not. The countries aren't paying these tariffs. What he's doing with these letters is he's informing other countries how much he's going to tax Americans when they buy their products. That's what he's doing. He's not telling them what they're going to pay. He's letting them know what we are going to pay. So he sent letters out to Japan and South Korea, saying 25% tariffs on Americans who import stuff from Japan and Korea. Now, even though their tariffs on us right now are almost non-existent. I think the average tariff rate in South Korea is under 2%, and in Japan it's under 1%, right? So these are small numbers, right? They're there to raise revenue more than anything else. They're not there to close down their markets to our products. Yet we're going to slap these countries with these 25% tariffs. Now, of course, Trump always likes to pretend that, well, there's these non-tariff barriers. No, there's not. They don't really exist. They're in his imagination. Just like all of the countries that were lining up to kiss his ass to make trade deals. I said that at the time. Right after Liberation Day, when Donald Trump came out and said they're lining up to kiss my ass, everybody is begging to make trade deals. I came out and said, I don't believe that. I don't think anybody is begging him for anything. I don't think they're getting all these phone calls. I think it's all being made up, or it's a figment of Trump's imagination. He had a dream or something like that. And now, right, almost 2 months later, Trump is saying, because we don't have any deals, because nobody is negotiating, well, we're just going to send out these letters and let everybody know what they're going to be paying. That proves that I was right, that it was all BS. That people aren't rushing to make deals because there's no deals to be made. This is just all part of the Trump show, pretending that he's negotiating us into some economic boom, that he's got to make deals with everybody. We don't need to make deals. We haven't been screwed over. They keep saying that, well, we got to change all the rotten deals that were made by incompetent presidents of the past. Well, you know, one of those deals was NAFTA, right, that he said was so great, right? And then, of course, he puts tariffs now, more tariffs on Mexico and Canada, you know, even though he's the one that did the NAFTA deal, or not the NAFTA, the USMCA, which was basically a rebranded NAFTA. And at the time, he said it was the greatest trade deal ever, even though it was pretty close to the worst trade deal ever, which was the one that USMCA replaced. But also, Trump just announced, I think yesterday, 50% tariffs on copper, which sent copper prices soaring by over 10%, over, I think, $5.50 a pound. No all-time record high on copper, although copper has pulled back a bit. But again, it's not really a tariff on copper, right? It's Americans who want to buy copper. Now, most Americans don't directly go out and buy a bunch of copper. It's companies that buy copper. Americans buy products that contain copper, right? Or if they buy houses, right? There's a lot of copper in your house, right? So you don't buy the copper, you just buy the house that has a lot of copper in it. But everybody who's buying products that contain copper, well, those products are going to be more expensive because the copper is more expensive. Look, it doesn't matter why the cost goes up, right? If the cost goes up because of a tariff, it's the same thing as it going up for any other reason, right? Your energy costs go up, your wages go up, your insurance cost goes up. Whatever the cost of production is, that's going to be embedded in the price. I mean, how can somebody think that that businesses pass on all their costs except tariffs? They just decide, well, we're just going to eat those. That's not how it works. They're indifferent. They're all costs. Like, the only time I think that a company may decide to eat some of the tariff, like the exporters, might be if there's really a viable U.S. alternative and they don't want to lose out on their market share, and they may be willing to accept slightly lower margins, so eat some of it. But in many cases, there is no U.S. domestic alternative. We've got to buy and import. And if all these countries are facing tariffs, well, they all pass them on because it doesn't put anybody at a competitive disadvantage, because everybody's got to build tariffs into their price structure. But the bottom line is prices are going up. You know, a lot of people are looking at the tariffs we have so far, and they're saying, oh, you see, the CPI hasn't really shot up, so tariffs aren't causing inflation. Now, tariffs don't cause inflation directly. Indirectly, there's going to be a lot more inflation as a result of these tariffs because of what the Fed does to monetize the larger deficits that the weaker economy, and in part the tariffs are going to weaken the economy, are going to produce, and the fact that these tariffs will trap more of our dollars in the U.S., so we'll export fewer dollars abroad. And so those dollars won't come back to buy our bonds and to buy our stocks. They'll stay in America to buy whatever products and services we have, bidding up those prices. So we are going to see higher inflation. But one of the main reasons that a lot of the goods that are impacted by the tariffs haven't seen bigger price increases yet is because there is a lag. A lot of the goods that Americans have been buying the last couple of months were imported before the tariffs were in effect. And so businesses didn't have to pay the cost yet on those goods. Well, now, more goods are coming in that have been subject to the tariffs. And now you're going to start to see those higher costs being passed on to the consumer. And again, initially too, businesses are not really sure how long the tariffs are going to be there. Rather than raising my prices, maybe I'll eat it a little bit of it now just to wait and see. But if the tariffs are still there, well, okay, I'm going to pass them on. That's going to happen. And now we'll see what happens because the new deadline for all these tariffs is August 1st. So Trump extended the deadlines. It was initially 2 months, which was supposed to be up, I think, next week, right? That was going to be 2 months from Liberation Day because Liberation Day or 3 months, 90 days. It was a 90-day pause. So Liberation Day was April 2nd, right? The new April Fool's Day. And then he called it off like a week later. So call that like, maybe it was like April 9th. And so July 9th, that's about where we are. So this is when all the reciprocal tariffs were supposed to come back. And so he tacoed out again, at least till August 1st. But Trump came out and said, that's it. August 1st is the deadline, and we're not moving it again. So either we have new deals or everybody pays the rate that I assign. And all these new deals, the 25% tariffs on Japan and Korea, 50% Brazil, I guess all the other, he's announced, I don't know, a dozen other countries have been hit with tariffs from between 20 and 40%, meaning Americans are going to be paying 20 to 40% tariffs, not all these countries. But those letters have gone out. Now, I think the only reason the stock market is still making new highs is because nobody believes him anymore. He's like, the boy who cried Tariff. People think it doesn't matter what Trump says, right? There's not going to be any tariffs. Maybe it's kind of like the Epstein files, right? Oh, I'm going to release them. Oh, they don't even exist. There's nothing to release. Don't even ask me about that topic. I can't believe you even care about this. Why are we still getting questions, right? He quickly transitioned out of Epstein, and maybe people think, well, the same thing's going to happen with the tariffs, right? He's talking about it. He's making a lot of noise, but at the end of the day, when it comes to tariffs, he is all bark and no bite. Well, I don't know. I mean, Trump's got an ego. I don't think he likes being called a taco. I don't think he likes being called a chicken, that he's chickening out. I remember if you ever watched, Back to the Future, but Marty didn't like being called chicken, right? And so he would do some crazy things if you called him chicken. Well, maybe he's a bit like Marty McFly. I don't think Donald Trump likes to be known as a chicken. And even though the market's tanked, the fact that they're not tanking now may, fool Trump into thinking that he can have these tariffs and see the market is going up. Even though I've announced these high tariffs, the market's still going up. He may not understand that the market's going up because nobody believes him, that everybody thinks he's going to chicken out. But again, he may just have to prove everybody how much courage he has, right? That he's not a chicken, right? And he may let these tariffs go into effect. And in that respect, the markets are playing literally a game of chicken. Because if Trump doesn't blink, if we actually do get these tariffs, I think we repeat what happened in April. I think we're going down in the stock market, we're going down in the bond market, and we're going down in the dollar, and we're going up in gold. In the meantime, people should be buying gold. They should be buying silver. I think we go up regardless of what happens. And I know a lot of people are still worried about buying gold and silver, right? There are people that are still waiting for a pullback. Oh, I don't want to buy $3,300 gold. I don't want to buy $36 silver. Well, if you don't want to buy $3,300 gold, be prepared to buy $3,600 gold or $4,000 gold, right? Because it's more likely to go up than down. I think we're near the bottom in both gold and silver. So don't press your luck. Don't hope for a big drop so you could buy more. Just buy more right now. And if you don't own any gold and silver, well, you better make sure and buy some right now. Oh, by the way, I got to take a quick break. I almost forgot. We got to do a commercial. So no one go anywhere. Stick around, and I'm going to continue this podcast at the other side of this break.
It's an interesting time for business. Tariff and trade policies are dynamic, supply chains squeezed, and cash flow tighter than ever. If your business can't adapt in real time, you're in a world of hurt. You need total visibility from global shipments to tariff impacts to real-time cash flow. That's NetSuite by Oracle, your AI-powered business management suite. Over 41,000 businesses have already future-proofed their businesses with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP. NetSuite brings accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. And with AI embedded throughout, you can automate a lot of those everyday tasks, letting your team stay strategic. NetSuite helps you know what's stuck, what it's costing you, and how to pivot fast. NetSuite is the platform that I would choose, and you should too. It's one system, full control. Tame the chaos with NetSuite. If your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, download the free ebook Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/gold. That's netsuite.com/gold.
Coming back here with what I was discussing on the I don't know. I keep getting these texts coming in. Hopefully nobody is hearing those. I gotta hold on. I gotta tell my kid to stop texting me. All right. Hopefully that stops it. But anyway, so I want to move on from the trade and talk about a few other things that happened. One of them is the jobs number that came out last week. And again, there was a lot of hype about this strong jobs report, more proof that we've got this booming economy. And we didn't have a strong jobs report. According to the government, we created 147,000 jobs in the month of July or June. 147,000. That's not a lot of jobs, but it was more jobs than they expected by a little bit. I forget what the expectation was now because it was a while ago, but it was a small beat. And there was a small upward revision to the prior month. Now, before we got the number, people were probably looking for a weak number because we got the ADP number a day earlier. The jobs numbers came out early last week because the markets were closed on Friday for the 4th of July. So it came out on Thursday, but we got the ADP number the prior day, and there was a loss of 33,000 jobs. Those are private sector jobs. So a loss of 33,000 jobs. And so that set the stage for maybe a weak non-farm number. But we didn't. We got a bigger number than they expected, but it's still not a strong number. It is a low number, 147,000 jobs. But when you look behind the curtain, it's even worse because half the jobs were government jobs, not the federal government. State and local governments hired about half those people. That's not good. These aren't productive jobs. They're not making anything, right? They're just gumming up the works. And now they take their paychecks and they got to buy products that were made in China and other places. So they run up the trade deficits, right? But if you add to the government jobs that are kind of related to the government, like healthcare and social services, right? Because a lot of those jobs are basically spending government money. So government is keeping them going. And again, they're not productive jobs. 92% of all the jobs that were created were either in government directly or indirectly through healthcare and social services. the private sector job creation was much weaker than had expected. Now, Donald Trump is supposed to be leading the comeback in the private sector. And there, we're doing poor. And manufacturing continue to shed jobs. So we don't have a manufacturing boom. If anything, it's a manufacturing bust. And it's going to get worse with tariffs. The tariffs are going to hurt manufacturing overall because they are going to increase the cost of a lot of the components that manufacturers are bringing in. So if you're a company in the US and you import a lot of components that go into your products, your costs are going to go up, you're going to be less competitive, and you're going to lose sales, and you're ultimately going to be a smaller business, lay some people off. So these jobs numbers, I think, again, is BS. People got excited about the 4.1% unemployment rate. Again, that's meaningless if you look at the U6 rate, which is closer to being accurate, but still understates it. It was 7.7. That's not a low unemployment rate. But if you factored in a lot of the discouraged people who are no longer picked up in the U6 because they've been discouraged for more than a year, you're looking at double-digit unemployment. And I'm sure if we still measured unemployment today the way we did in the 70s and 80s, if we had the same methodology, we would have an official unemployment rate north of 10%. So there's no way that you can claim that we have low unemployment. We have high unemployment. We have a weak labor market. That's why the economy is actually weak. That's why Trump got elected. That's why we have these huge deficits. Oh, and by the way, another thing that happened between my last podcast and this one was the big, beautiful bill, better known as the budget busting bill, or, the big ugly bill, or however you want to define it. But that got passed. They managed to get it past the House and the Senate, strict party lines. In fact, in the Senate, J.D. Vance had to cast the tie-breaking vote. It squeaked through the House, and Donald Trump signed it in a ceremony on the 4th of July, right? As if this is great news, right? I'm going to sign this great bill on Independence Day because somehow I'm making Americans more independent by consigning them to a future of debt and inflation, because that's what this bill does, right? It's as aptly named as the Inflation Reduction Act. There's nothing beautiful about this bill. The only thing honest is the fact that it's big, right? It was over 900 pages. But because of this bill, the budget deficits will be higher over the next several years than they would have been without the bill. So the bill builds on the Biden budget deficits and makes them bigger. So all of these Republicans who campaigned about how damaging the Biden deficits were, who blamed all the inflation on the reckless spending of Biden and the deficit spending, they voted to preserve all of that spending and all those deficits, but not just to preserve them, but to expand them, to make them bigger, to increase government spending and to increase the deficits. Now, yes, within the bill, there are tax cuts, right? So Americans will see more dollars in their paychecks, right? Some Americans will see a bigger boost than others. We do have the no tax on tips. Of course, you still got to pay FICA on your tips. And I think there's a cap there. Maybe it's $20,000 or $25,000 a year you're allowed to earn. But I think there's going to be a lot more cheating. I think people are going to be a lot less likely to report their tips, even if they exceed the minimum, because I think no one's even going to be auditing the tips now that there's no real income tax to be gained. I mean, maybe people will miss out on the Social Security tax, but I think waiters and bartenders and models on OnlyFans or whoever is living off of tips, I think to the extent that they were reporting honestly in the past, and maybe a lot of people were cheating, I think they're just going to cheat even more. But a lot of people are going to get some tax relief. And of course, part of the tax relief is they're going to avoid a tax hike, right? Because the first round of the Trump tax cuts would have expired if they didn't vote to renew them. And in fact, they expanded on them, especially with SALT. That deduction is now up to $40,000 instead of $10,000. although it sunsets, I think, in 6 years. But who cares about 6 years from now or 5 years from now, rather? All that really matters is what happens this year, next year. That's why most of the cuts don't even count. Although apparently the work requirements for Medicaid for the able-bodied, originally in the House version, they didn't kick in until 2029. I think now they kick in 2026, so not as bad. But there's still all sorts of ways to skirt the requirements. So I really don't think it amounts to much. Unfortunately, it lets the Democrats pretend that they're slashing benefits and throwing grandma or whoever out in this, over a cliff. They stood and said, "Hey, we have to vote against this bill because it's gutting Medicaid," and the Republicans are pretending that this is a great deficit-reducing bill, and we're voting to make government smaller and to solve our fiscal problems when they're not doing it. I mean, Rand Paul in the Senate voted against it. You had Massey in the House voting against it. They voted against it because they increased the debt, right? But most of the other Republicans didn't care. They all stand in lockstep. And if this bill, identical bill, was proposed by a Republican president, a Democratic president, and a Democratic Congress, I bet if you didn't change a word of the bill, if it was exactly the same, you'd pretty much have all the Republicans being against it. They'd be saying, this is a disaster, this makes the deficits bigger, this is reckless and irresponsible, right? And the Democrats would be loving it, right? They'd be talking about it, how it was a great bill, right? It preserves all the big government programs, preserves Medicaid, Medicare, Obamacare. They would like the bill if they proposed it. So it shows you there's really not much difference. You got Elon Musk now, who again is very frustrated, and rightly so, by the fact that Doge is gone and it's not going to do anything. It was all part of the Trump show. I talked about that before. And he wants to start a new party, the America Party, for the frustrated middle. There's no room in the middle. The Republicans and the Democrats are so close together, you can't get in between them. So we don't need a third party to thread that tiny needle to get in the middle of two basically socialist parties that want big government and just fight, over, the edges, right? The extremes. Well, where do you, I want to have a little bit difference here or a little bit there. We need a party that's way to the right of the Democrats and the Republicans, assuming that way to the right means less government when it comes to the social issues, less government when it comes to the economic issues, and fiscal responsibility. Because this big, beautiful budget-busting bill, which Trump and the Republicans are touting as the biggest tax cut in U.S. history, is actually the biggest tax hike in U.S. history because it grows the deficit more than any other bill in history. In fact, they raised the debt ceiling by $5 trillion just to get us through the next 2 years, right? If this really was a good bill that was going to reduce the deficit, why'd they have to raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion? It's because they know that it's going to increase the deficit. And you know what? I think it's going to increase it more than they think. I don't even believe we're going to make it to 2 years. We may not even make it to the midterm elections before we bump up against that ceiling. And we already raised the debt by $5 trillion, which would mean it goes from $37 trillion to $42 trillion, right? That's where it'll be when we hit the ceiling again. But the fact that they raised it that high, this is the biggest increase in the debt ceiling we've ever had, and it passed without a single Democratic vote. So who's the party for big government when almost every Republican in the House and Senate voted to raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion over the objection of every Democrat, right? So this is not a good look for the Republicans. It's certainly not good for the country. And so, yes, Elon Musk is frustrated, but, we don't need a party in the middle, right? We need a party that actually is going to level with the public and not pretend that a tax hike is a tax cut. And the reason that I consider it a tax hike is because government spending goes way up. And the cost of government is what it spends, not what it collects in taxes, because every dime the government spends has to be paid for. So if the government spending goes up, government costs more money. Where does government get the money? From the public. So if the government costs more, the public has to pay more. So how are we going to pay? Well, if they're cutting our income taxes, how are we going to pay? Well, one way is tariffs, right? We're getting these tariffs. So we'll earn more money. But when we spend that money, we're going to have to pay higher prices because of the tariffs. But the bigger way we're going to pay is inflation, because not only are prices going to go up because of tariffs, and that's just, the imports really, all the prices are going to go up because of inflation, because the tariffs are going to help weaken an already weak economy. Interest rates are going up. Donald Trump wants a new Fed chairman to cut interest rates. Okay, when they cut interest rates, long-term rates can just as easily go up. In fact, they will go up. And that means mortgage rates go up and all sorts of debt costs go up. But we're going to have a recession. We're going to have more money printing, more inflation, and that is going to, be a tax hike, right? Because we're going to pay for this excessive deficit spending through higher prices, a higher cost of living. It's the inflation tax. And one of the reasons that Trump got elected is he promised to lower the inflation tax. Well, instead of lowering the inflation tax, he is raising the inflation tax. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about and show you, the dangers of democracy. And I mentioned earlier, New York, about what it means to be an American, and I don't want to really, give away too much of that, because I want everybody to go and watch the video of the remix. But America was formed as a republic. And one of the reasons that the founding fathers created a republic and not a democracy was on display in the Democratic mayoral primary in New York, where Zohan Mandami won the Democratic nomination. And I assume he's the front runner now to become the next mayor of New York City. And that is going to be a terrible outcome for New York. Although I'm not exactly sure how much of his Marxist agenda he can actually implement in New York City, because I do believe maybe there'll be some way of the governor or the city council to put some brakes on what he does. And of course, once he gets elected, he may not want to completely destroy the city that elected him, because then he'd get blamed, assuming he understands that a lot of this socialist, communist crap that he's selling, maybe it played well, for votes, but he doesn't want to actually implement it. But the point I'm making is people voted for this nonsense. That is the problem with democracy, because people will be dumb enough to vote in a communist, right? And so why would you want that, right? You would want to protect the country from that kind of outcome. I mean, people who are such fans of democracy, hey, as long as somebody is democratically elected, well, I'm going to support it. Well, who's going to support the democratic election of a communist? I mean, if you vote in communism, you still get communism, right? It doesn't matter that, the majority of people voted for it. It's still bad. It's just as bad as if it was forced on you, by a gunpoint. If your neighbors voted for communism, you're just as screwed. And so the idea is not to have elections when they could produce that kind of outcome. Some of the crazy things that that this guy is proposing. One of them is he wants to have the government, the city, open up a bunch of grocery stores. Well, I mean, first of all, nothing the city runs smoothly, runs efficiently. He wants the city to run grocery stores because apparently the private capitalists who own the grocery stores now are ripping off their customers, right? Because they're gouging them, because they're making a profit. And so if the city could just run the grocery stores, they won't have to make a profit, and they can pass on the savings to the shoppers. Well, first of all, the lowest margin businesses probably in the city are the grocery stores and the supermarkets. I mean, they mark stuff up like, 1, 2, 3%. So even if you took all the profit out of the grocery business, prices would go down by 2 or 3%. But if you took all the profit out of the grocery business, there'd be no grocery stores, because the grocers need to make a profit. They need to make money because they're doing a lot of work. They got to get paid for their effort, or they're not going to do it. So if you take the profit out of grocery stores, there's no grocery stores. Now, if the government operates the grocery stores, right, and does it without a profit, you think they're going to be as efficient as private owners in a competitive market? No. The cost of food, even if the government doesn't make a profit, their costs are going to be so much higher because they don't have any incentives to keep the cost down. Costs are going to skyrocket. People are going to pay a lot more to buy food from the government than they pay to buy it from the private sector. Now, like, one of the things that he was talking about was, well, the government-owned grocery stores aren't going to pay any rent. Well, what, are they just going to steal the land from the landlords? How do you mean they're not going to pay any rent? How are they going to get a space in the city rent-free? Now, maybe the city already owns the property. Are they going to kick out a paying tenant so they can stick in a government-owned grocery store and not charge rent? But the taxpayers still pay for it one way or another. But if you're going to do that, if you think grocery stores should have free rent, why not just go to the grocery stores that already exist and give them free rent, right? Although you can't give them free rent. The government would have to pay their rent, because otherwise you're stealing money from the landlords, which he's perfectly willing to do anyway, because he wants rent control. He wants to make sure that nobody can raise their rent. Well, what's going to happen if nobody can raise your rent? Well, there's not going to be houses. There's not going to be, there's going to be a huge shortage of rents. Just like in these government-owned grocery stores, one of the things that's going to happen, especially if they try to sell these groceries at lower prices, even though it costs them more, you're going to have long lines. People are going to be lining up for bread at government-owned grocery stores in New York, just like they lined up for for bread at government-owned grocery stores in the Soviet Union. I mean, do you think that if the communists in New York City take over the grocery stores, are they going to run them any better than the communists who took them over in the Soviet Union? No, it's the same ideology, right? They're going to have the same outcome, which is long lines and empty shelves, right? I think I saw somebody put up a meme, the difference between, capitalism and socialism is under capitalism, the bread lines up for people. And they just showed somebody going to a store, and there's all different kinds of bread that you have to choose from. So many brands, so many kinds. The shelves are full. So the bread is lining up, and the people get to pick which bread they want. But under communism, the people are lining up for bread, because you have a long line of people, and you got some stale, white bread, right? You don't have a bunch of choices. You have one kind of bread, and it's probably not even fresh, and and you're waiting online for hours. He's got another crazy idea. He wants to make all the buses free, right? So you don't have to pay to get on a bus. Now, apparently, a lot of people don't pay now. They just hop on, and same thing with the subways. They just jump the turnstile. Apparently, that's like acceptable now, which is probably part of the problem. But if you officially make all the buses free, what's going to happen? Well, the buses are going to be too crowded, because people are just going to ride them, right? If it doesn't cost you anything, people are going to ride buses even if they don't need the bus. People might be just living on the buses, right? You can just stay on there and just go on indefinitely. So you'll have a free bus, but the bus is going to be so crowded that there's not even any room to sit down, right? I mean, you want to have people paying to use the bus so that they use it sparingly, right? If you have to go 10 blocks, all right, I'm going to walk. I'm not going to pay for the bus. But if the bus is free, well, hell, why should I walk anywhere? I'm just going to hop on a bus. I mean, whatever is free is going to be overutilized. So you have to have a price to discourage excess use, so the people who actually need to ride the bus can get a seat, right? So all of these ideas are these cockamamie ideas. But the thing is, the voters bought it. The voters in the Democratic Party bought this nonsense. And what scares me about this is it's a little bit of a window into what's coming. Because as I've been saying, the voters who voted for Trump, the MAGA movement, and the in between, the independents, because they voted for Trump because they believed he was going to make America great again. He was going to get rid of inflation. He was going to end all the wars. We were really going to have an economic boom. They're going to be very disappointed when Trump finishes his term and inflation is higher, much higher than when he started. Unemployment is higher, and they're in much worse economic shape than they were before he was elected. And that's going to make it very difficult for any Republican to succeed him. Even a guy like Iran, maybe, who could completely distance himself from the collapse because he voted against some of this stuff. I think it's still too close to comfort. I think that the Democrats are going to have a much easier path to the White House if the economy is lousy and the Republican Party gets the blame. But what kind of Democrat? It could be the same type of Democrat that just won in New York. This could be a look at what's going to happen. This is like the AOC, the Zarhan Mandani. He's like, AOC. I mean, she's ecstatic, right, about this outcome. Or Bernie Sanders, right? It's that wing of the Democratic Party. I mean, just like maybe Trump kind of redefined the Republican Party to some new populist brand. Well, what's populism in the Democratic Party is really a rebranded socialism. And I think that is where we're coming, or that's the direction that we're headed. And that is why people really need to prepare their portfolios now. You need to get more into gold and silver. You need to get into these foreign stocks, because all of this is going to be a disaster for the dollar. We got the Fed minutes that came out earlier today. And, you still have some of the Fed governors who are hesitant about cutting rates, but most of them still expect a couple of rate cuts between now and the end of the year. It should be obvious that rates need to go higher, especially now that the Big Beautiful Bill has been passed, because the Big Beautiful Bill is a massive Keynesian fiscal stimulus. It increases the deficits, but it's not in a way that increases economic growth. The Republicans are saying, oh, we're going to get more growth because of tax cuts. That's not the way it's going to work. Tax cuts promote growth if they promote savings and investment, because that's what grows the economy. Most of these tax cuts in the Big Beautiful Bill don't do that. They are targeted to increase spending, to increase consumption, put more money in the pockets of the middle class and the lower class, who are more likely to spend their money, right? And that increased spending doesn't grow the economy. It may grow the trade deficits, it may grow debt in general, but it's not going to mean we're going to have a larger economy that produces more stuff, because we're not getting more savings and more investment out of these tax cuts, because they simply leave more money in people's pockets to spend. But the government is not cutting back. See, if the government cut spending and we replaced government spending with private sector spending, that'd be great. But they're not doing that. The government isn't cutting spending. The government's going to spend more. So the government's going to spend more, and now the people are going to spend more because they're going to pay less in taxes. So everyone's going to be spending more, but we're not producing more. And so that's just more inflation. We're going to print more money. We're going to have a bigger bubble in this economy. But the problem is, I think the air is already coming out of this bubble, and a lot more is going to come out. But what the Fed should be doing is trying to counteract the Big Beautiful Bill, that Keynesian stimulus, with tighter monetary policy. The Fed is trying to claim, or Powell is saying, hey, the reason we're not cutting rates is because we're worried about the tariffs. That's not the reason not to cut rates. He should be more worried about the larger deficits produced by the Big Beautiful Bill. Those tax cuts are the reason that we need to hike rates. We need to offset the fiscal stimulus with a monetary sedative, right? If we're going to have looser monetary policy, looser fiscal policy, we need tighter monetary policy. But that's not what we're going to get. We're going to end up with loose fiscal policy, and then a return to even looser monetary policy. That's an inflationary cocktail. And so if you thought Bidenflation was bad, wait till you get a load of Trumpflation, because that's going to be a whole lot worse. Anyway, I think that probably wraps it up for today's podcast. Again, if you like the podcast, don't forget to give me the thumbs up or make a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, you can make a comment in there. I like to read them, and sometimes I respond to them. I gotta go through them fast. So if you do comment, keep it short and concise. Sometimes people leave a really long comment and I can't even read it, even though you probably put down some really thoughtful stuff. If it's too long, I don't have the time. So you got to be really concise. Think of like a post on X, even shorter than that, like two sentences. So really try to shrink down whatever you're saying, and then I got a better chance of reading it. Maybe other people have time to read them if they're longer. But let me know that you liked it. And again, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'd really love to see my channel get over 600,000 subscribers. I'm getting very close now to 1.2 million. I'm less than 15,000 away from 1.2 million X followers. So I'd like to get a little bit above, more above a million than 1.1. So if you're not currently following me on X, make sure and do that. Again, I'm going to be here in Connecticut for at least another month and a half. And so I'm not going to do as many podcasts as I would be doing if I was in my studio in Puerto Rico. And, by the way, people have commented that, hey, the quality is better here. It has to do with the way I'm recording it, even though I'm just using my cell phone. But we're going to start doing it the same way. And I'm redoing the pod. I've got all these new cameras coming in. When I get back to Puerto Rico, the quality is going to be much better. And it's going to be better than what it is right now, doing it from my cell phone on my laptop. But it's going to be a lot better than it used to be. So I know I've been getting teased a lot. Hey, why don't you have better quality on your video, on your podcast, or your sound? Well, all that is coming. I'm not a professional broadcaster. I do this in my spare time. I'm really more, I'm an asset manager. I got, I do gold and silver. So I'm not, really a broadcaster, but I guess, yeah, people expected a little bit more from me. And so I'm delivering that. It's just taking some time to put everything together. So when I get back up, this is going to be about mid-August. I think we're going to be having a much better quality. Anyway, let's see what happens. I do think we're going to get a lot of fireworks in the markets as we get closer to the end of the month. And if I'm right, and if the chicken, Trump doesn't want to be chicken again, and he actually sticks to his guns, and these tariffs actually see the light of day, then the fireworks aren't going to be for 4th of July. They're going to be in the stock market. They're going to be in the bond market. And you want to make sure you take advantage of the strength that we're seeing in the U.S. stock market now to sell U.S. stocks, sell U.S. bonds, and get fully positioned in foreign stocks, foreign bonds, precious metals, gold and silver mining stocks. We saw some more consolidation. Royal Gold bought out, I think, Endeavor Mining and a copper company. I think this is just, again, we're going to see a lot more consolidation in this industry because the companies are still so incredibly cheap. Even though they've gone up, it still makes a lot of sense for companies that have so much cash to buy out other companies rather than spending money on exploration and development. You can buy the metal much cheaper on Wall Street than you can, going out and looking for it in the real world. So I expect more of this, but all this is good for investors in these mining stocks. So take advantage of this weakness in both the underlying metals and the stocks to get positioned before the end of the month when ugly reality of these tariffs may set in and catch a lot of investors by surprise. Bye for now.